Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of LGOtv Big Talk. And why Big Talk? Because I hate small talk. Today's guest is no stranger to Big Talk because he hosts his own podcast. In fact, it's not just a podcast, it's not just any old podcast. It is one of the best podcasts on the air today. In fact, you can't just take my word for it. Apple called it one of the best podcasts in 2018, and he gets 6 million downloads a month. He has had guests from Dennis Rodman. He's had Neil deGrasse Tyson. He's had me. So, he gets all the best guests. Welcome to my show today, Jordan Harbinger. So
Thanks for
thrilled to
having
have
me
you
on.
here.
Yeah, I'm thrilled too. I just really wish that you did your show later in the day.
I know
'Cause
you rolled out of bed in smoky California to
yeah.
be here. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, it's actually still dark out right now. Not because it's early, but because we have crazy wildfires. So that sort of puts a timestamp on this, depending on when you're watching us or listening to us. It looked like Mars yesterday, and probably will again today.
The photos of what people are posting on social media they're mind blowing. I mean, it really does
Yeah.
look like the red planet. It's nuts.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got a friend of a friend who lives on a street called Mars in San Francisco, and he took a photo of this street sign with the orange sky in the background, and it's like really surreal. I mean, it's the whole thing. The cliche that 2020 is a weird year. I just kept saying, "Oh, it's cognitive bias." We always think like where we are right now is the most intense of whatever we're feeling, but it's like kind of undeniable that every month something pretty severe and national news or international news making has happened every single month here in 2020. It's not just you. Don't adjust your TV set. Your life is weird now.
Yeah, it is remarkable that something like murder hornets suddenly appearing but then
Yeah.
disappearing was not even news because so many other
Yeah.
things happened.
Murder hornets? Oh, that was. Don't even worry about that. We don't have time to cover that. We'll pull the panic button on that one in November again when we run out of other news.
No
Right after the
worries.
meteor. Yeah.
Exactly. So when I invite people on the show, I like to come up with three nouns to describe them. And I've always said that I'm not letting anybody use things like thought leader, author,
Oh yeah.
speaker, whatever, because it's like that's what we all are. So I have reformed lawyer,
hmm
podcasting guru, because I know you probably love the word guru,
hmm
and playbook deconstructor, because I know on your show you help people deconstruct the playbook of the most successful people on the planet. I could have also added instafluencer hater because I know
Yeah,
we
I
have
hate
that in
that.
common,
Yeah.
or networker extraordinaire because
Mm,
also we have that in common. But I want to get to all those things. But
sure.
I want to start with the reform lawyer because, as you know, I'm a reform law student, and I
Mm,
think um, uh, I do. I would say that it makes me smarter than you. That I realized it early
yeah,
on,
it
but it makes me
does.
dumber than you because I actually couldn't get through law school. I was
Couldn't
going to
get through
flunk
it.
out. Couldn't get through it. Couldn't get through it. So you graduate from law school, University of Michigan. You have plans to go into this big career of corporate law, and then you see somebody along the way who's doing things totally differently, and you were like, "Huh, what's up with that?"
Yeah, I I was I made it through the bar, right? And that was like, okay, now I'm gonna get a job and it's gonna be great. And there's not really anything I can do about it, even if I hate it, so I might as well enjoy it. And I go, which is a great outlook on a first career, by the way.
We think like 90% of law school students, when they pass the bar, think that probably.
Yeah, like, oh, this was the hard part. Oh no, the whole rest of my life is going to be hard. But at least this is
Yay!
over. Yeah. And so the guy who hired me, his name was Dave, and he was never in the office. And I thought, like, oh, this guy's got it figured out. Because when I was in high school, I could pass the test by showing up early and like studying 15 minutes of geometry and then taking a geometry test and getting a B plus and being like, whatever, this is fine. It's not a big deal. I'll get a extra credit here and there. I mean, school was kind of like that for me, high school. Then I got to college and I was like, oh crap, everyone's smart. Everyone is really sharp. So I had to outwork everyone and study harder. But then I got to Wall Street and I was like, oh no, everyone has figured out the strategy of outworking everyone else and everyone is smart. I'm just going to get fired. Like I can't really do anything there's no competitive advantage that I have that remains, and I don't have any other strategies. So I'm in trouble here. So I continue to try to outwork people, but how are you going to outwork people that work 7 days a week? How are you going to stay awake longer than someone else, right? I mean, and being smarter is like a very slow process if you can even pull it off, compared to all these other people who are like more talented or equally talented, right? Probably more talented if we're being real. And have better attention spans. I mean, it gets down to like the minutia details that didn't matter as much in high school or college, where it's like, oh, attention span, whatever, just get the notes later. It's like that doesn't work on Wall Street, you know. It doesn't work well on Wall Street. So Dave was never in the office, and I thought, if I can figure out how he's working from home, because that's what he must be doing, then I can work from home. It'll take longer for people to realize that I'm the weakest link in this new lawyer chain, thus longer to fire me. Thus, maybe I'll figure it out. Maybe the curve at which, like, I'm trying to do a graph in a mirrored image here, but like maybe the curve at which I figure out what I'm doing hits the curve of like the time it would take for them to fire me. Maybe I reach that point first, and they're like, well, he was kind of slow, but now he seems to get it, and like that buys me that time to work from home.
So
right?
to be clear, your strategy was to hide.
Yes.
Okay,
Mhm.
that's yeah, that's probably not gonna work out well.
Yeah. Except it works out really well for a lot of people in finance, honestly. There were, and I got the idea because there were tons of people that had graduated from various schools, and I was like, yeah, who's the worst person at your firm? Just trying to make sure that it was like somebody who was worse than me. And I was like, are they still there?
They're
You know,
still
that kind
there.
of thing. And they were still there. There were people that were like, oh yeah, there's a gal who works with me, and we've only seen her like 3 times. And then when we assigned her something for a project, she was like, I don't want that kind of work. And then we finally met up with her at an all hands meeting, and we said, what do you do all day? And she said, oh, I just mostly read novels. And she still worked at this law firm. And I thought, this is a person who is not all there, and they still have their job. Like, they
So
are
she can do
mentally
it.
not there. Yeah.
If she can do it, you can do it. You set
Yeah.
the bar as low as you possibly can so that you slither under it, basically,
Right.
is the goal
Like,
here. Okay.
I wasn't going to just read novels all day. I was going to try and learn how to do my job better. I was going to work hard as much as I can. So I figure if that person still has a job, then I'm good, right? I'm set. I'm fine. So I ended up trying that strategy by asking Dave how he managed to work from home all the time. Now, he's a partner, so obviously he has other leeway that I wouldn't have had, but I sort of tiptoed around the subject. And that's when he told me that he wasn't necessarily working from home most of the time. He was doing jujitsu and playing golf and going to events and charity stuff, because he would come in with like a limp, you know, once a month when he came in, and I'd be like, what's wrong? He's like, I twisted it doing jujitsu.
Yeah,
And I was just like,
you don't get a limp reading novels at home.
no, and you also don't get a limp like securitizing subprime mortgages into security pools, right? So like
Right.
you just don't get that gangster lean from that. So I was like, what's happening? How come you're never in the office? Because he was supposed to be like my mentor, which in corporate speak is like, check this box on an HR form that some HR person set up and is like, we're gonna have a mentorship program, and everyone's like, ugh, whatever. Do we have an expense account that goes with it? Yeah, okay, great. Let's go see Blue Man Group and eat McCormick and Schmick. And you as the mentee are like, guess I'm getting mentored now. I don't know. So he was like, all right, let's go to Starbucks in the basement while I answer emails on my BlackBerry. And I was like, oh, great. Okay, so this isn't a great mentor-mentee relationship. But I got better advice than any of those suckers who are eating seafood towers at McCormick and Schmick, because what he told me was he brings in business for the firm. And that was why he was never in the office, because his billable hours, which is like where we get our bonus, which our bonus is on Wall Street, those can be like more than your salary. As a lawyer, they're not usually, but it's like 50 grand. It might even be more than 50 grand. And as a partner, it's probably like 3 or 5 times that amount of money. So your salary might be like 200,000, but your bonus might be like 200,000. So you want to hit your billable hours, which is like 2,000 or 2,500 hours a year. And that's billable, not how long you stay in the office. So what Dave was doing was not worrying about that. And I thought, how are you not worried about that? And the reason is because every time he brought in a new deal, he would get like 5%. So if you're getting 5% of, I don't know, like $1 million or $2 million or whatever it is, you don't worry about your billable hours, because your commission from bringing in new deals, which you're getting from like frickin' doing jujitsu and playing golf all day, are equal to or higher than your billable hours. So there's no reason to sacrifice your quality of life and sacrifice that bonus money or commission money for sitting in the office literally 7 days a week, trying and just hoping that you slide into home on that billable hours bonus. So I was like, this is really good. So this guy is more valuable, higher paid, works less, and when he does work is doing things that are more interesting and more fun than everybody else. Like, he had figured out the secret. He was from Brooklyn and had a tan, so he was like always, one step ahead of everybody else. That was huge. I thought, I got to do this. I got to figure this out. So, of course, I asked, how do you bring in deals? And he's like, just be cool, man. And I was like, let me stop you right there.
You're like, have you seen me? I'm like, I was never cool. I don't know.
We're lawyers. We don't do cool generally. We graduate from overpriced law schools and then pray that money will make us cool. That's why everyone is here, Dave. Let's clear that record up right now. So that was like that was a non-starter. That was like, be taller, be yourself, right. Be confident. Like,
be smarter.
Be smarter. Equally actionable advice, in air quotes. And that didn't work. So I started to break down. The reason I started to get really into networking and relationship building was because I knew it was about networking and relationships, but it was like, okay, I didn't go to Brooklyn preparatory school where everybody then went to Brooklyn Law, where everybody then went to Wall Street. I went to Michigan, didn't think about networking ever. What do I do right now to start the process? And nobody had any advice. It was like, we'll pay for you to go to a Dale Carnegie class, which was fine, but it was a bunch of like, and I'm not even exaggerating, like people who worked at the post office who were like, my boss says I'm going to get fired if I can't run a meeting. And I'm like, why can't you run a meeting? And they're like, oh, I have stage fright. I'm like, there's 8 people in the room. It's,
not
like
a stage.
It's not a stage. And I felt bad for them because obviously they had crippling anxiety that was like undiagnosed. But I was in there being like, okay, I need to generate multi-million-dollar legal deals with partners at investment banks, and everybody else was like, I need to not like freeze like a deer in headlights when I run a meeting for 4 or 5 or 6 people at the post office. And I thought, I'm probably not going to learn how to generate multi-million-dollar law deals from a guy who's like not really full-time employed teaching a class on Tuesday nights at the YMCA. Like, no offense to Seth, my instructor at Dale Carnegie, but that guy he had no experience doing what I wanted to do at all. He's
certainly not going to teach you how to be cool.
No, he was barely holding it together. I mean, we're talking Argyle socks, Argyle sweater vest, not the same type of, not matching Argyle either. So this was like, man, this is not going to go well. So I really had to go kind of the extra step and learn this stuff on my own and break down psychology and go to every instructor that I could and class that I could and read every book that I could and try stuff because nobody else was doing this. Nobody I could find.
So I have to tell you, I did your course. You have this great networking course. You teach people how to networking in 6 minutes. And one of the things that I did when I first took the course, which was so brilliant, was I think you called it your Connect 4 strategy, where you just go down to the bottom of your text and you just text the last 4 people on there randomly, just like, hey, thinking about you, whatever. So in anticipation of this morning, I was like, I'm going to give that a shot just to see. So I texted 4 people. I texted the managing editor of the Boston Globe, where I live. I texted a state senator. I texted a woman who I think has a great network of people who I would like to get into to interview for my next book. And I texted Malala. Like actual Malala.
Wow,
because
good for you.
She and
Humble
I spoke,
brag. I have Malala's phone number.
I don't have her phone number, but I sent her a Facebook message because she and I spoke at the same event, and I randomly friended her on Facebook. And then once every 6 months or so, she'll like a post of mine, and I'm like, wow. I'd like to interview her for my next book.
Yeah.
So all 4 of the people responded. Malala, actually, I got a little heart and like double prayer hands, and I just sent her like, hey, thinking about you, and so glad you're doing the work you're doing. That's
Yeah.
all, carry on. And that was it. And now I have a door that's open that she'll probably slam in my face about interviewing her on the
We'll
show for.
see.
But all 4 of those people responded, and I didn't reach out to them for anything in particular, but just the strategy of just going back and diving back into your network. 2 of those people I forgot existed,
Sure.
and then when I saw them, I was like, "Oh, actually, they'd have really good ideas." So it's such an amazing strategy to just keep going back and tilling the soil.
Yes, and that's really what it is. Like a lot of people will go, the chief objection that I get from people, or one of them, is, "Oh, I'm pretty naturally good at networking," and I'm thinking, really? Because your last post on LinkedIn, or your LinkedIn profile photo, says like open to work or looking for work or something like that. And I'm not trying to be hard on people who are hitting hard times economically right now, because that happens. But I'm always just shocked at the amount of people who look at a course like 6 Minute Networking and they go, which is jordanharbinger.com/course, by the way. I think it's singular. Courses might work, but it is course normally. So thanks for throwing that in the bottom there. That's cool for people who are watching us. I'll teach this to like the Secret Service or like MI6 or something like that. And like I've taught this to places where like I can't even see the people I'm teaching because of like security concerns, and they're like videotaping me in an empty room, and there's people watching it in another room. And like those people, they're asking questions, they're submitting things, and they're like going through the course, and like, this is really helpful, thank you. And then I'll reach out to like someone who just graduated from college, and they're like, "No, I'm good. I'm a great networker." And I'm just like, wow, this is really surprising to me. A lot of people, they don't realize the value of tilling the soil. They think, "Oh, I'm a good networker because whenever I want something, I just reach out and email a stranger, and somebody will often reply because I'm 24 and a nice person." And it's like, you are setting yourself up to get wrecked later on in life when nobody cares that you're like, when you're in your 20s, you'll be surprised how easy networking is, because you'll be like, "Hey, I'm 23. I just graduated from college. I would love to get some career advice." And like the CEO of FedEx will be like, "Hey, really happy to hear from you. Great to see initiative in young people. Try that when you're 35." And they're like, "Dude, what are you? Don't email me.
Yeah,
Call
not
my
cute.
office." Yeah, not cute anymore. What are you doing? I mean, some people are nicer than that, but most of the time, especially nowadays, they'll just kind of like, they're getting too much communication anyway. They're like, "Talk to my third rung publicist or something if you want to ask me a question."
Yes.
That's not going to fly. So when you have a connection that's old, like somebody on the bottom of your text messages, and you're scrolling all the way to the bottom of your text on your phone, those are those old threads where it's like you met up with your uncle and 3 of his golf buddies for lunch one day, and you never really kept in touch with them, but one of them was a Wall Street attorney, and now you're in law school. Like, reach out to that person. They're going to be happy to hear from you. If you reach out when you want something, they're not going to be happy to hear from you. You have to dig the well before you're thirsty, as those old cheesy 90s books about networking tell you to do. That's the trick.
Yeah, it's so true. And I spent 20 years as an executive recruiter, so like I have pretty good at networking, right? Like I
Yeah.
was like, "Oh, what do I need to learn networking from?" And I
Yeah.
was like, "Well, let me see what he has to teach me." And it's really incredible, because I literally sent the same text with like a little variation to each of the
Yeah.
4 people, which was just, "Hey, woke up this morning thinking about you, and so grateful you're in the world doing the work you're doing.
Yeah.
Have a great Friday."
Sure.
And 3 of the 4, I just the prayer hands from
Yeah.
Malala, but 3 of the 4 actually wrote, "What a great message to wake up to
Mm.
in such a crazy time." Like they I think people are so appreciative of just being seen sometimes, and we
Yes.
think that CEOs and these really impressive bold-faced people are untouchable, but they're human, and like their kids are yelling at them and whining about online school, or whatever else. They're dealing with the same stuff we are. They're just doing it in a nicer house or a nicer car.
Yeah.
But it was incredible to me, like how human the responses were.
Yeah, very few people are going to write back and go, "How dare you?" Or there's some people that might not get back to you, and a lot of people will go, "Oh no, they're mad at me now," or they won't do anything. You don't really know that. A lot of people will. I get responses like a month later, and I'm like, "Who checks their texts a month late? Who
It
are
stresses
you?"
me out.
It stresses me out. My friend does that. She'll show me her phone to show me something. It has like 72 unread texts, and I'm like, "You're freaking me out right now. I've got to go take a shower or scratch my back or something." It's like, I get like tweaking out.
God. But I did get one that was like basically a like new phone, who dis, I gotta like,
Yeah.
I've changed my, I got a new phone. This isn't in my context. And then I like wrote my name and she was like, oh my God, of course. That's amazing. Hey, let's catch up. And we're
Yeah.
talking today at 2:00. So
That's why you got to put your name. You got to put your name in the original text, because if I get a text from somebody I don't know, I don't say new phone, who dis. I just go, hey, if I ignore this, they'll never know that I don't know who they are, and they'll think they have the wrong number. So I'm good.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, I get that sometimes, and I'll like scroll back if there's other text, and I'll look and try to get it from context. And when I can, I'm always like, "Thanks, friend."
Yeah, thanks. How are you? Where are you these days? Trying to fish for clues. Depends how much time I have, right? Like,
I love that.
How's biz? Oh, I'm independently wealthy and retired. Oh, right, of course. Just kidding. Tom from New Hampshire? Yeah, But other than that, most people aren't going to bother doing that, right?
Okay,
They're just gonna. You were saying?
Sorry. So you figure out the clues, you figure out how to create a network, and then you use it to build a podcast where you're interviewing some of the most incredibly famous people. I mean, talk to me about just the process of how you go from learning how to, deal with the fact that you can't be cool, but you have to actually network, to, asking Neil deGrasse Tyson or Dennis Rodman or Dennis Quaid to show up in your studio and interview with you.
Yeah. Some of it is just good sales job, I guess. Like you get a publicist emailing you and saying, "Will you talk about this CD? So and so likes it." And I'm like, "Can I have that person on too?" And you like strike a lot of deals. So some of it is a negotiation, and a lot of it really is like networking. Though it really is like, I'll reach out to somebody who's a publicist that got me a show guest 3 years ago, and I'll say, "Hey, do you have anyone that might be a fit for the Jordan Harbinger show?" And they'll be like, "Oh, hey, sorry, I'm getting back to you late." It's 2 weeks later. But I do have this person, and she's giving a talk at the Commonwealth Club back when things were open. Like, that's how I got Nadezhda Tolokonnikova from the band Pussy Riot from Russia. She was like a world-renowned artist. I don't know if you know who that is. Great name.
I couldn't pronounce her name, but I certainly know the activism work of Pussy Riot.
Yeah, I mean, she went to like the equivalent of the Gulag, still lives in Russia, and like speaks out publicly against Vladimir Putin and isn't dead. So she's doing a lot of things right, and she's like 29. Yeah. Which is probably partly why she just feels like she's invincible. But she has kids, everything. I mean, the whole story is wild. And they're like, the publisher said she's not doing any media. And I go, well, why is she coming to San Francisco? Well, she's giving a paid talk at the whatever Commonwealth Club or something like that. And I said, what if I get her for like an hour right before, walking distance from there? And they were like, okay, fine. So I was the only person in the US, I think aside from like Vanity Fair or something, that got an interview with her. And she did Vanity Fair before my show. And the networking thing really came into play because I had reached out via the Instagram before, and I was like, hey, just wanted to say I'm excited for our interview. So when she came in, she was like, I don't like media, but you seem nice. I got your message on Instagram. And I was like, oh, how weird. And then after the interview, she told me that she was one of the only, or that we were one of the only media outlets that she had fun doing ever in her life. So I was like, this is work. The relationship thing, it works. Like, it's a real set of skills that if you practice consistently over time, you really can build real relationships with people, but also it just gets you a really good opportunity. Like for every amazing guest on the show that you see where you're like, holy crap, how'd you get that person? There are like a dozen or 24 people that I never managed to get. And there's a whole list of people that I've been talking to for like 3 or 4 years, and they're like, their publicist changes and I have to like start over. It's just like a constant, it's like a sales job, but with networking, it's very similar. It's like reverse sales. So with networking, instead of trying to book somebody like, hey, is Dan Rather have any availability? Is Dan doing any projects now? Instead of hitting the timing all the time, you really have to, you're doing reverse sales where you're like trying to help people all the time. And that's the key with building the show as well, is it's like you reaching out to publicists, seeing if they have anything. And if I'm not a fit for whatever they're doing, maybe I can recommend somebody else. So that they always want to come to me because they're like, well, even if Jordan says no, he's probably going to throw me to somebody else who's worthwhile. So they know that reaching out to me will have ROI, whereas most publicists are reaching out to 100 people and they're getting 0 ROI. So they start with me. And that's how I get things like I got Kobe Bryant because I was trying to get a comedian that they had offered me this publicity agency. They were like, "Do you want Jim Gaffigan?" I was like, "Sure, that would be interesting." And then they were like, back and forth, back and forth. They were like, "We're so sorry, we overbooked his time slot. We double booked you in another show, and that show's live." And I was like, "Oh well, better, whatever, it happens." And they were like, "Yeah, do you want like Kobe Bryant? Would you be open to that?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'll take that instead
Nice
of Jim
sloppy
Gaffigan."
second, sure.
Sorry, Jim. Yeah, sorry, Jim. You seem like a nice guy, but I'm gonna go with Kobe for this one. So yeah, flew down and interviewed Kobe, and it was luck, but it was also like I just been hitting it so many times. If you buy 1,000 lottery tickets, you're gonna get a $5 scratcher.
Yeah, I mean, it's luck, but I think it's a number of other things, right? I mean, I think it's building the relationships over time, as you mentioned. I think it's having an abundance mentality that it's not like, oh, if I'm not there, I'm not going to tell anybody else because I want to get the guest myself later.
Right.
I think so many people have the scarcity mentality. And then I think it's also saying yes. Like you could have said, well, I'm not really, I live in Northern California, Kobe's in Southern California. I can't really get down there, but like you jumped on a plane and you went down. Like
Right.
it's also making it happen. And I think there's a lot that goes into what looks from the outside to be frictionless success when really it's like doing all the stuff behind the scenes. And then when opportunity strikes, jumping forward and just going.
Definitely there's that. And outworking people is still part of my strategy. Like I was talking with somebody who's a show booker for a popular daytime TV show, and they said, "Who's booking your guests?" And I said, "Me." And they said, "You're doing the show and you're booking the guests?" And I was like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Oh, okay, well, who does this and this for you?" And I was like, "That's me." And they were like, "What are you talking about? This is a full-time job and I have an assistant and I'm a show booker for a show that's on once a week. You have 3 episodes a week and you're booking your own guests?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And they'll be like, "Oh, well, how long were you in publicity or management before this?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" They're like, "You don't have a background in booking people on other people's shows?" Like they think like, "Oh, I must be a retired show booker from Ellen or something like that, and I'm using my existing network." I'm like, "No, I'm freaking stabbing in the dark all the time." And so being able to outwork other people and figure things out, that's an advantage because a lot of people go, "Well, I can't do this until I have resources to hire it out." And it's like, guess what? You might never be able to do that ever.
Yeah. I think we spend so much time waiting till we're ready. And you're never ready. It's never perfect. It's nonsense. So were you, as a kid, were you like deeply curious about people's stories, or were you really interested, or were you like always trying to uncover the playbook of why some people were successful, or were you just you kind of skated by on your own until you couldn't, and that's when you had to confront this?
I guess that's an interesting question. Like I haven't thought about this, but now that I'm thinking about it, yes, when I was in, I don't know, maybe first or second grade, I can't even remember now. I remember there was a really popular kid who everyone liked. And I remember going, "Hey, Matt, how come you are popular? Do you have any idea?" And he was like, "Oh, yeah, I'll teach you." He had no idea, obviously.
Be cool, man. Be cool.
Yeah, be cool, man. But he's like, "Let me think about this." So he kept thinking about it and he had like terrible ideas. But what was interesting was he told all the other kids found out that I wanted to learn this and they somehow didn't make fun of me. They thought it was an interesting question. Probably everyone had the same question. And there'd be like one kid that was like, "You need cool shoes," and Matt would be like, "You don't need cool shoes, dude. Don't worry about it." And then another kid would be like, "You need to be really good at soccer," and Matt would be like, "You don't have to be any better at soccer than you already are." And then like other kid would be like, "You need to have a cool BMX bike," like, and he'd be like, "No, it's not that." So he knew what it wasn't, but he didn't know what it was. So I hit a dead end, but I thought it was interesting that he could readily identify what it was not. So I was like, there is a formula. He just doesn't know what it is. So I did continually try and figure out how like Todd Patterson memorized his multiplication tables faster than everyone else, and he taught me how to do that. So early on, I was looking at these things like advantages, but I didn't really think like I'm going to deconstruct the playbooks of the most successful kids in the playground. Like that wasn't a real thing that I was doing. I just had questions that I wasn't afraid to ask, and I think that did get ratcheted up several notches when I started hitting walls because I never. It's not that I always assumed I'd be able to get by on natural, I guess, smarts in high school. It's that I never knew anything else other than, okay, if I just sort of like do the work, I'll be fine. If I show up, I'll be fine. I was no brilliant student. I was just good enough. And then like I started to get really good when I started to do the work. So I knew that there was more though, because I knew that some people had really good connections and networks and other people were really funny. And I was like, is it natural talent always, or is there more to the story? So I did start thinking about this pretty early.
Yeah, I think even people who have natural talent, if you're not thinking about it, you can't access that talent, right? I mean, it's got to be a
Hmm.
combination of both. Like Kobe had a lot of natural talent, but he also got to the court at like 4 a.m. every day and
Yeah.
worked out for 2 hours before the workouts with the team. I think
Yeah.
it's got to be a combination of both. So as you're building the show, I mean, I of course I want to ask you to like who your favorite guests have been, but I know that's probably like picking your favorite children. But if
It
you want to
is.
volunteer, that's fine. I'm interested in the list of people you haven't been able to get and sort of who your dream guests would be. And I'm also interested in who you were most intimidated by.
Sure, yeah. So I've been trying to get Dan Rather for like 5 years, and he just did a book with Audible, and I emailed Audible like 100 times, and they were like, "Oh, you just missed our campaign's over with him." And I was like, "I didn't miss anything. You just ignored my email for 2 months." So I'm not
Exactly.
bitter about it at all. And I would love to get like Mikhail Gorbachev. I think would be really interesting. Um, he would be. I gotta ask him what's up with that weird Pizza Hut commercial. Do you remember that?
No.
Oh my God. Google Gorbachev if you can spell it. Pizza Hut commercial. He's actually in a Pizza Hut commercial. It's
I
ridiculous.
I feel like I might have seen that and maybe blocked it out because it
Yeah.
it just it feels like an acid trip flashback or
Yeah.
something. Just thinking about it in my brain right now.
It is. It's like from the 90s, and it's a Pizza Hut commercial where Gorbachev is, or there's Russians. It's in Russian. It aired in Russia, arguing about Gorbachev, just you ruined this country, and another woman's like he brought freedom, and then another person's like he destroyed the whatever party, and then other people are like he brought us all these amazing things, and then some kids like Pizza Hut, and then like Gorbachev walks in, and everyone is like toasting him or sitting in the corner or something like that, and then he like raises a piece of pizza and eats it, and it's actually him, and I thought, what is happening? Like it is such a good metaphor for a country that like is embracing capitalism but doesn't quite get that like the president's not supposed to do it.
Yeah, I we're gonna link to that in the show notes.
Do it. Yeah.
That's I got it. What was he paid for that? I gotta know. I
I don't know, man. I
I
mean,
hope it was a lot.
maybe, but also like former Soviet Union, they might have been like, here's the thing, $100 and free pizza for life. And he's
Yeah.
probably like, that sounds like a pretty good deal, man. I don't know.
Sold.
Yeah.
Sold. We'll make a box with like the little, birthmark on it, your head, just a special
That's
Gorbachev
right. He
package.
he grew up in the Soviet Union, right? So like free food is a pretty good unlimited free food. Like that
Sure.
might be worth more than any amount of rubles they could print for that guy. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, my
Um,
grandparents grew up in the Soviet Union, would have jumped on that deal. I'm
yeah,
sure. So, all right, Dan Rather,
yeah,
Mikhail Gorbachev. So you're shooting low here. Okay.
yeah. I really have. Yeah, I'm not even sure. Like who else? I've got some big names in mind that I suppose would be interesting. I mean, who doesn't want to get Barack Obama on their podcast? That would be
Sure.
pretty interesting too. Um, there's probably more. I don't know. Everyone asks me this, and I feel like the answers just keep changing. So
Yeah.
but yeah, I don't really like have any actors. People are like, what about like Hollywood people? And I'm like, what about Hollywood people? Yeah, great. Remember that time? It reminds me of those Chris Farley clips from Saturday Night Live. Remember that time you were in that movie and then like you blew everything up? That was awesome. What am I going to say to a lot of these people? Some of them are intensely creative, but they're not necessarily more creative than somebody who you've never heard of who's like written 5 movies.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't need to get the star of the movie. I don't need to get Julia Roberts if I can get Aaron Sorkin or something like that. Is he a movie writer? That sounds like a movie
Yeah,
writer name.
he wrote The West Wing and
Yeah,
among other
yeah.
stuff. Right. Yeah, he'd
Yeah.
be fascinating.
Right. So he would be up there. Yeah. It's a lot of people think you need famous people on the podcast to make the show a success, and it's just not true. Like if you have a big show already, you'll get more of your fan base and maybe your external fan base or non-fans checking it out. If you're a show that has 100 downloads an episode, but your cousin is Tom Cruise, you're not getting 100,000 people that are going to subscribe to you. You're going to get 50,000 people or 5 that are disappointed with the quality of whatever you're doing. Or they're going to go, wow, this guy's a really good interviewer. And the next person is, oh, an internet marketer that sells protein shakes, pass, unsubscribe, done. So there's no, the whole like, promote your show by standing on the shoulders of giants. That's like not really accurate. It doesn't really work. Like if you're Joe Rogan and you get famous people on, people go, wow, look at that. But if you're nobody and you get somebody famous on, you get 5 minutes of fame, but it's iTunes. It's like internet fame, and it's not even worth anything. Podcasts don't go viral, which is both good and bad because it stops us from chasing the algorithm, but it also means that like you can't. There's no magic thing that grows your show. You know, like you get Kobe on and people go, wow, congratulations, and you see like a 10% download spike for that episode only.
Yeah. So as you're building your podcast and you're starting to get bigger guests and people are approaching you, is there a moment where you realize that this is going to be bigger than you thought it could be? Or were your goals always to have it to be the size or bigger than it is now?
No, I never really thought it would even be like a job that made money. Well, not never. I mean, the first, 6 months or whatever, I was like, this isn't like a job. People don't make money online. It's 2006. Or 2006, 2007. So it wasn't like nobody's generating income online. The only people I knew that made money online were selling things on eBay, which is totally different. Like if you're selling men's shoes on eBay, you're making money online, but you're selling shoes. Like I can wrap my mind around that concept. What had happened was I was talking about things that I was learning, and I lived in Michigan at the time when I first started, and I had this mortgage banker email me and go, will you train my sales team? And I was like, oh, sorry, you misunderstand. I'm not a trainer. I'm not a coach. I'm not a sales trainer. And he'd go, yeah, you don't understand. I've hired all these coaches and trainers. What I'm getting from your free stuff is much better than what these yutzes have charged me like $5-10 grand a day to come to Los Angeles and teach. Can I fly you out here? And I was like, no, I got to take the bar exam. I can't be flying around. Like, what are you talking about? He's like, okay, can you do conference calls where you train my team? And I was like, yeah, $50 an hour. And he was like, okay, first of all, here's $5,000. Second of all, your price should be at least $200 an hour. I know you're young, but like, dude, what are you talking about? And so he gave me $5 grand and he was like, you have to raise your prices. It's embarrassing. And also people aren't going to value it. And don't be ridiculous. You're undervaluing yourself. So I raised my prices to like $100, thinking I would not get anybody to like buy this other than him. And then I talked about it on the podcast. This is like 6 months after starting my podcast, my first podcast. And people were like, oh, we can pay you? Okay, great. I have $300. I want to get 3 hours of your time. I live in Norway. I'm a college student and I'm like really shy because I'm an immigrant or something like that. So I'd have all of these clients. And I remember the first time I thought that this was a business, I was laying on my friend's hammock making a Skype call on my phone, like talking to some guy in, I think Denmark or whatever, who was a shy immigrant. It wasn't Norway. I confused those. And he was like, what do I do? Like, I don't really know how to make friends. Like where I come from, people are really warm and open. And in Denmark, they're really not. And also I look different because he was from Africa. So he was like, I really stick out and everyone like looks at me, but I don't know what to do. So I taught him a bunch of different things and he was having a lot of success. And he's like, this is the best money I've ever spent. And I was like, this is really, really amazing. Like I'm helping people for real. This is like what I thought being a lawyer would be like, only it's much more interesting because I'm really working out complex issues that I can help with, not like filing something that somebody doesn't even want. So I just kept doing that and kept talking about it. And then finally one day a guy was like, I don't really get a lot from our phone coaching. I mean, I get some, but I need to see it. I need to see what you're doing. And I thought, well, we're out of luck. And he goes, what if I give you $5,000 and I just sleep on your couch for like 2 weeks? And I was like, so okay, like, yeah. I'm like, I know this guy, like, he's like a normal person. He can, I wouldn't mind. So I let him sleep on my couch for 2 weeks for $5 grand. And then I talked about that on my podcast and people were like, I didn't realize we could come over and sleep over at your house. So then it was like, how much is this? And I was like, $5,000 for the week. Cause I didn't want 2 weeks. Cause the guy got really annoying after 1 week. And I was like, $5,000 a week. And they were like, okay, so then I had just so many people coming over, I couldn't even handle it. I had to get like bunk beds in my New York apartment, and my neighbors were like, "This is bullshit," because like there's like a fancy co-op on Wall Street, and they're like, So who are the guys that have 9 people sleeping in a one bedroom and they're like on bunk beds and they're always home late and they're like really friendly? Like, get these guys out of my building. This is such bullshit. Yeah, it's like it was like a $5,500 a month apartment. This is 2006, so it's like baller, right? Like has a pool in the basement and like a jacuzzi on the roof, and they're like, "Who are the kids? I've worked my whole life to live here. Get out of here!"
You've got these like random people walking up to strangers in the lobby practicing their networking techniques.
Yeah, and they're like, "Hi, I'm John. I'm a farmer from Idaho. What's your name?" And they're like, "Why are you talking to me in the elevator, you weirdo? This is Manhattan. Like, what are you doing?"
They must have thought you were running like a escort service or a gigolo service or something out of there.
It's funny you should say that. There were, I lived in the financial district, and there's a street called Stone Street, which actually was the red light district from like 1776. And so I remember hearing about that, and I made a joke about how we were bringing that back. And I made a joke at a bar, and this woman turns to me and goes, "Well, you're very good at what you do. I've been watching you guys." And I was like, "Oh, what are you talking about?" And it turned out she was actually running an escort, like a real escort service. And she was like, "I see the guys, not your usual male escort types, but everybody has a type." And she really thought we were running like a very niche, normal guy escort service where the guys are really friendly and outgoing, but like don't have 6-packs. And she's like, you could probably make more if you varied your inventory up a little bit, AKA like go to the gym, I think is what she was trying to say. So it was really funny because I remember becoming friends with this woman, and then I would watch her and I'd be like, oh, she does bring a lot of attractive friends to the bar and talk to a lot of these investment bankers. Like, this is how this business works. She really thought we were in it.
I think that's hilarious. So she's like sizing you up as potential competition or what's going on. And meanwhile, you're like, every lady's got a normcore kink.
Yeah, right. Pretty much. Yeah. She was sizing us up as competition. She was like, "I don't mind. Obviously, we're going for different clientele."
Yeah, but if you expand, then it's going to be a problem.
She kind of was thinking like, "Hey, what are you doing? You're clearly like teaching these guys or sizing them up. Like, what are you looking for? Here's what I look for in my ladies." Like, it was more like almost professional courtesy. And she's like, "I do have some people that might be interested." And I was like, "Look, this is not what we're doing." Because she was like, "You can refer people to me and I can refer people to you. We can coexist on Stone Street." And I was like, "You have nothing to worry about."
Well, what's hilarious is that some of the fellas who were going to her probably could have used your course.
Definitely.
You actually could have had a really good pipeline from her.
Yeah. I was like, I might steal your clients, but not in the way that you think.
Not the way that you think. Okay, so you go from that to now having this huge podcast. And at some point you're like, this is a business. I could do this. I'm going to just double down here.
Yeah, what happened was 2008 happened and the economy really went into the tank, and I was in financial derivatives, and my firm was like, "We're going to lay everyone off after the year. We're going to pay you 9 months of severance." And I thought, 9 months, I can definitely get it. How long can it take to start a profitable business? 9 months is a long time. So I took my severance money and I just lived off of that for like years because it takes longer than 9 months to start a profitable business, especially in an online niche when you don't know what the hell you're doing at all. Right. In podcasting, which was like nascent in 2006, 2007, and nobody even knew what they were. It's so funny. I remember walking around the building in New York and talking with people, and they'd be like, "What do you do?" And we'd be like, "Oh, we run a podcast from here," and da-da-da. And they'd be like, "Podcast? What is that?" And now if I'm like, "Yeah, I run a podcast," people are like, "Oh." Like I remember talking to these 70-plus-year-old people that run an Airbnb that I stay at sometimes in LA, and they go, "What do you do?" And I go, "Do you know what a podcast is?" And they go, "Honey, we're not that old," Whereas meanwhile, like 10 years earlier in 2007 or whatever, 2008, people would go, "What do you do?" And I go, "Do you know what a podcast is?" And they'd be like, "No, I've never heard that word before." Like they'd never even heard the word before. And I was like, "It's like a downloadable radio show." And they were like, "I don't really understand." Something with iPods.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds like a weirdo like in his mom's basement who's just
people still think that. I still get people who will meet me at some event and they'll go, "Oh, so what, but like what's like your full-time job?" Or like, "Is that your full-time job?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And they're always just shocked when they're like, "Oh," they think like, "Oh, it must be like one of those guys who begs for, coffee money when they're DJing on Twitch or something like that." And it's like, "No, this is like a full-time gig. We have at least I'm paying the bills of at least 10 plus people around the world full time working here, helping me out with stuff. You know, and they just can't wrap their mind around it. But I try not to be offended, but then I think, no, I totally get it. Like, I didn't know how people made money online in 2006, 2007. It happened to me by accident. So of course, this person who's like a certified financial analyst doesn't really get how this works if they don't listen to podcasts. Like, they don't hear ads for Casper mattresses, so they don't know. So yeah,
and to be fair, I mean, probably 90% of the people that you meet who tell you that they have a podcast probably aren't paying their bills with that
they're
podcast.
Not. Yeah, no, they're not. Yeah, it's a fair question. It's kind of like if someone says I'm an artist, you're like, cool. So where does your mom live? Like, what basement are you in?
Right.
You know, you don't think like, holy crap, this is the guy who painted the mural at Facebook and now has $200 million. You don't think that.
Yeah. You think, where are you waiting tables?
Right. Yeah. Like, oh, I thought I saw you folding towels at Equinox last week. How you doing, man? You know, like that kind of thing.
So is this the thing? Do you think you're just like, I'm just going to keep riding this forever and ever? Or are there like other things that you want to be doing using this platform, or you know, with the leverage you have, with the network you have, with the access that you have now? What do you do with this? You have this, you know, giant podcast with 6 million downloads every month. You can get arguably most guests that you want. I know Mikhail Gorbachev is busy doing Pizza Hut commercials, and Dan Rather's too busy for you. But other than that, you know, it's been a pretty good run.
Yeah, it's been a pretty good run. It's funny. I think I'm closer to Gorbachev than I am Dan Rather. You'd be surprised.
He has more time in his hands.
He does. Yeah. He definitely, well, I can imagine. I don't really know what he's up to these days. I would imagine somebody who half the country thinks ruined the entire Soviet Union is probably laying low, playing a little golf. Maybe. Yeah. I don't know. We'll see. I'll let you know. For me, I like the idea of, since I have a 1-year-old, being around for a lot of stuff, not having to go travel and do stuff. Because I see people, and they're always, anybody who looks at my business goes, man, you're leaving a ton of money on the table. Like, where are all your paid courses? Where are your live events? Where are you, you know, why aren't you doing like a speaking tour? How come you don't have a book? And I'm just like, right now I read books and talk to smart people, and I make like a pretty damn good living doing it. Whenever I talk to anybody who writes a book, they're like, yeah, so this part's a nightmare, and then when you're done with that, then you have to call all your friends and all your non-friends and like bug them to like do you a favor and sell your crap. Yeah. And then when you do a live event, yeah, you call in favors that you just, like, one of my friends put it really accurately. She goes, you call in favors that you really, really did not want to call in because now you owe that person one and they are awful. And I'm like, yep, that's definitely a thing. Like hey, can I come on your show and sell my book? And it's like, yeah, I'll figure out a way for you to come on my show and sell your like multi-level marketing, you know, garbage success course that like I can't even stand looking at. And like, I've got to figure out how to tell you no and talk about something else. You know, like, obviously you don't get involved with people who are scammy, but like you have to balance that. I never have to think like, ooh, should I deal with this person? They're pretty shady. That calculation doesn't even enter. But when you're really trying to like make your $2 million advance back, you're doing a lot of things you probably don't want to do. And then the live events, like people go, you're leaving so much money on the table. And I go, okay, cool. Let's see who's doing this great. I called Mark Manson, who's an author friend of mine, last year. I think this conversation happened last year. It must have. He was doing a speaking tour, and I was like, oh, how do you like it? And he was like, well, and I don't want to blow him up, but it was basically like, yeah, I probably could have like not gone and done any of these and made about the same amount of money just finishing my book earlier and then working on some small projects. And he's like, instead, I got to like be away from my wife, my family, my friends, and go speak at bookstores or like arenas or whatever it was, theaters in Albuquerque. And I get those offers all the time. And it's like, oh, once you start doing the calculation of valuing the time away from people and not just valuing your time for yourself, which I'm sure you're used to as like somebody who has a family. I wasn't really used to that before. The calculation is totally different. Like, hey, do you want to go to Dubai and give a talk and you'll be there for 4 days? And it's like, no, not really, because I'm making that speaking fee for 4 days, but then also travel, then also jet lag, then also I'm stuck in this place without my family. And it's like the ROI for time would have been good if I was a single guy, because it's like, yeah, screw it, 10 grand or 40 grand or whatever it is for that period of time. But then when you're like, each day with my family's worth $500 or $200, whatever you want to do, then you're like, okay, negative this. And then half the time you do the calculation and you're like, it's cheaper for me to stay home and check emails and just like make some headway on this other project. And a lot of people don't do that. I see that happening a lot with people. They don't value the time they value their time, which is good. That's like step one. But then they don't value the opportunity cost of their family time. They value only opportunity cost of other things that generate dollars. And that's dangerous, because that's how you end up being a lawyer who's like never home. You're like, but I've got to build these hours, because if I don't hit this, we lose 200 grand. So you start valuing your time in a way that's like not totally accurate, because what's that expression? Kids spell love time. And I would imagine that the lower the less amount of time you have with them, the more valuable the small chunks actually are. So if you're a dad that's like gone for 60 hours a week, your Saturday might be worth like $3,000 to $5,000 if it's free and you're hanging out with your kids and you never get to see them otherwise. And that's problematic if you're spending it in the office waiting for a frickin' fax from a banker, which is like what we were doing on those weekends.
That is such an excellent insight. I have a rule, like, so my kids they're 16 and 18, they're 10th grade and 12th grade. So I'm on the other end of the tunnel from you. And I used to say to people all the time that I actually value my time with my kids so much, but I also think that a starring role is never, you kind of take the star for granted, but the cameo, you're like, special appearance by so-and-so. So I've always made it a rule that I pick up my kids at minimum 2 days a week, 3 if I can, 4 if I'm like having a great week and I'm kind of around, but never 5. So, we have a babysitter who's, around, and she would pick up the kids when they were in middle school. And I would find that when I would pick them up, like the windshield time when you're driving and they're exhausted from school and, you're not looking eye to eye. So there's no confrontation. I have 2 boys. So, eye to eye is sort of tough for them in middle school. That's when the great parenting would happen. And my husband used to say, it's like, it's so inefficient. Like, you drive 15 minutes there, you drive 15 minutes home. He's like, you're wasting like an hour and a half to 2 hours every week. And I'm like, no, like, those are my best parenting moments. Like, yes, I'm leaving money on the table. I could charge a client thousands of dollars for that time, but also like your kids, like right now, you have a 1-year-old. So your 1-year-old needs you all the time. But when your kids are in middle school, they don't need you unless they need you. But when they need you, you better fucking be there. And you cannot predict that time ahead of time. So this insight that it's not just about how much money you could be making if you're doing this or doing that, that's easy. We all understand that calculation, but the time that you're missing with your family, you don't get that back. And kids remember it. Like, they're not going to come lean on you when there's, a difficult thing happening if you don't have, again, it's the same as networking, right? Like, you got to build that relationship with a slow drip over time. So I think that's a really excellent point. And I think when we think about success, everybody's like bigger, better, faster, more. You have this opportunity, you have this potential. You could feel the burden of it and feel like you need to grow your show as big and fast as possible and grow your speaking and do the book and all the rest. But this idea that the way that you thrive in this moment is to actually figure out what actually matters to you and how do you show up for all of those things, not just the ones that are putting money in the bank, but the ones that are, putting, it's not like how many hours do you have in your life. It's like, what's the life in your hours?
Yeah, no, I like that. And I think about that all the time. So people who try and get me to like expand my business, I have to say no. And there's that whole like, learn how to say no more. But it's not just that. It's also, you really do have to come up with like a goal. And if the goal is be around all the time, then you can't then do like 7,000 different things. I met too many people that were like the screwed up kids that were wealthy. And the thing was, their parents made millions of dollars. They had everything growing up. I remember being so jealous.
Except their parents.
They just didn't have any parents. And it's not even like, this is an extreme example, but like there was one family that was I thought was relatively happy, but both kids died of drug overdoses later on. And I remember going like, what? They were like nice. Their mom was always around. And then, as I started to investigate, I was like, what happened to Ben? Why? Why did this happen? People were like, well, he like got into it early and in high school he was doing this. And I was like, I didn't even know that. you can't do pain meds and pills every day. His dad was a doctor. I'm like, I bet his dad had that stuff laying around the house. And, you know, he just wasn't paying attention because he was making fake boobs for all the women in the neighborhood. And that stuff it's easy for that stuff to happen when you're not paying attention. And I don't think the dad was like, oh, having a family is so stressful, I'm not going to bother. He was probably like, I'm killing it. I made $5 million last year, or whatever he was doing. He's probably like, I am crushing the dad thing. I'm around on some weekends, you know, I'm doing this and that, but he just wasn't like, he wasn't around enough to prevent this. And I don't know if every parent, I don't know if you can prevent that all the time, but I think like you can start early enough that, I don't want to judge because there's plenty of people who've lost kids from things like that. And it's not because they weren't around. It's because of other tragic circumstances. So maybe that's a bad or unfair example, but there were a lot of people that had bad parents that were really wealthy where I grew up. And so I saw that firsthand growing up. And I remember being like, why does Brad shoplift? His parents own 3 car dealerships. You know, that was like, I remember seeing that all the time. And my parents were like, I don't know, let's get your stuff. Remember, we're going dog sledding this week. And I'm just like, oh yeah, we do this. And they never do stuff like that.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah. I mean, I grew up in Miami in the 80s, so I had the same view as you, where there was just there's so many drugs and so much stuff. And you know, sometimes I think it's not just, you know, going dog sledding. Sometimes it's just, although that would be super fun to do.
It is super fun.
Like,
Highly
but
recommended.
sometimes it's just like being around. It's like cooking a meal together. It's just sort of like the downtime where you just kind of like conversation just sort of flows. And so I don't know. I think I love this idea of, you know, the way that you crush it sometimes is not by crushing it. And, you know, we get all this like Instagram bullshit hustle porn and, you know, it's nonsense, right? People standing in front of their G6s that they've rented, trying to tell
Yeah.
you that you need to do all these things. And I love that you've defined for yourself what success will look like at this, you know, in this chapter of your life.
Yeah, I'm just Jaden's 1, so I'm like, by the time he's old enough to want to do stuff outside the house all the time, I'll either be close to retired or I'll be running things. Even now, I'm like I could easily take time off to do anything. He's just 1, so he doesn't care. Like he just wants to like throw things and eat strawberry slices. You know, that's all. But when he's like 7 or 8 and wants to go to Disneyland, I'm like, we can go on Tuesday. We don't have to wait in long lines. You know, we can do this in the middle of the week. And then when he gets a little bit older and he's like, oh, it's spring break. What am I going to do? I remember sitting at home for that time. And I'm like, no, we can do our family vacations during this time. You know, I can take the whole summer off when they have the whole summer off until they just are like, dude, don't take the summer off. We're not hanging out with you, old fart. You know, until
Exactly.
that happens.
There's a small window.
Yeah, I'm like, I probably have a couple years where they're going to be wanting to do something during the summer and aren't just like, dad sucks because he's old, you know? So I'm like, I'm going to use those and do really cool stuff. And I talk to my wife all the time, and it is about like lifestyle design. I'm like, we can be the cool parents. Every parent thinks that, I'm sure. We can be the cool parents that like take a group of kids on a fun safari and we're like running the trip. You know, we have time, we have the ability to do that. You know, we can do a lot of these different things that other parents, my parents certainly could not have done. My mom was a teacher and we still couldn't do it because my dad had to go to work. So it was like, what are we going to do? I'm going to go on vacation with my mom alone? Like, that'd be weird.
Well,
You know?
one of I went to high school with a guy, Brad Meltzer, who's written a number of best-selling, you know, books, who you should have on your show. He has a book coming out actually this fall. And he does the super fun thing where once a year, every year, rather than turn right to take his kids to school, they turn left and he drives to Disney World. And it's just like a surprise day and he never tells them it's coming. And it's just like this thing. And I thought, that's just so cool. It's so fun. But I will give you one tip and then we'll close out here. From my teenagers when I was joking around about how I'm the cool mom. And they're like,
Yeah.
you're not the cool mom.
Delusional mom.
But you could exactly. And they're like, you don't want to be the cool mom. The cool mom
Mm.
shows up wearing like a juicy couture, you know, sweatsuit and like handing her kids pot, right? Like my
Yeah,
kids would
that's
like
not
the pot,
cool.
but like, yeah, you don't want to be the cool mom because my older son said, you just be a good mom who does cool things in their life.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll be a cool mom. Like you be a cool person who's a mom, and that's how you become the cool mom. So that's advice from my 18-year-old to you as a parent. Take it if you want.
I'll take it.
So I know people can find you by looking at the course. I've already had a couple of people here comment that they've signed up, so that's cool.
Great.
How can people find your podcast? How can they listen? How can they subscribe?
Sure, any podcast app, so Spotify, Apple Podcasts, just search for the Jordan Harbinger Show, Jordan Harbinger Show. Anything, like people who want to learn science, I do question and answer every Friday, so Feedback Friday, I always get crazy stuff in there. So it's there's something in there for everyone, whether it's business knowledge or you just want to see amazing people profiled by an interviewer that's actually listening. You know, that's my jam. So I would love it if people, if they got value out of this, check that out. And of course, the 6-minute networking course is at jordanharbinger.com/courses, you put so kindly in the lower third there. So thanks. It's been fun. It's early, but it was fun.
It's early. Now you have the whole rest of the day to hang out
That's
with
right.
Jaden.
That's
See?
right.
There
I'm
you
going to go change a diaper.
All right. Have fun. Thank you so much.
Thank you.